Hi there everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Joe and I'm going to be here to bring you the winning deck list from the FFTCG Winter Cup 2017. And the winner this time round was a wonderful man named Achin. And he is the biggest sweetheart ever. I actually tried to film a little intro video instead of this one during the Winter Cup with Anthony, as you can kind of see here, but my phone decided not to have any sound. So I'm very, very sorry, Anthony. No one's going to be able to hear your beautiful French accent voice. You'll just have to deal with kind of the gist of what I'm going to tell you instead. But from what I'm told, he is referred to as the French Joesephyr, which took me aback because apparently he changes his hair colour as often as I do, and that's quite cool. So I mean, he's one of the nicest guys, and I'm so honoured for him to give me. I mean, I actually have the very deck list that he wrote for the Winter Cup right here. And he, gave me some insights as to the choices in his deck and some little fun trivia pieces about it. So if you're interested in the winning deck list for the Winter Cup this year, then stay tuned and keep on watching. Now, the first thing I wanted to say is that this deck does have a name, and apparently it's like inspired. Anthony was a big fan of my videos, which is very, very sweet, and it's nice to know that I can inspire people, even who go on to win these events. It's a very, very big deal for me. But the deck is named the Rose of May, and obviously I'm going to be a big, massive fan of this deck because of the primary card in it, which is Beatrix. So, I mean, going into the deck list itself, it's got it's mono water, so it's nice and simple for a lot of people. So a lot of the cards are very, very kind of standard, but there are some very interesting twists in this deck. So I'm going to be reading this off of the deck list in front of me, so if I'm looking down at any point, then do forgive me. So the forwards in this deck, we have 24 forwards and then 17 backups, 7 summons and 2 monsters. And then going into the forwards, straight up, we've got 2 Zidane, which is the starter deck one, which goes in pretty much everything. So I'm just going to be presenting this in exactly the same way as Anthony did on the deck list itself. And then 3 Garnet, 3 Steiner, Garnet, Steiner, Zidane, and they're very ICO. It's a very solid FF9 engine, and this deck is very, very heavily themed around Final Fantasy IX, as a lot of water decks are, and they do very, very well. I'm so pleased to see how good Final Fantasy IX is in this game because it's so consistent. Everything you have searches something else, so you have your Steiners, but the thing in this deck that's very interesting is that the Steiner that Anthony uses is not the searching Steiner, it's the legendary Steiner from Opus 4. And then the main reason for that is because he's just such a strong value forward. For 4 CP at 8k, he's on curve straight away. But if you've taken damage, which is likely to happen over the course of the game, you're going to be drawing cards when you play him. So he's a 2 CP 8k guy that has the ability to kind of dull other forwards in order to make himself more powerful. So as long as you attack with him first, your opponent's very unlikely to want to block him for fear that they'll lose their guy and you not lose the Steiner. And even if you do lose the Steiner, you can always play another one and then draw more cards, and then you just keep pushing, and it's really, really good. And then 3 Beatrix. Honest to God, fandom, my massive fanboyisms aside for Beatrix, she's extremely good. She's very, very good. Even if you don't have Steiner, she's a well above the curve 3 CP unit. She doesn't look like she is because she's only got 7k power, but when she attacks, all your opponents forward lose 1000 power. That's a big deal, and you'd be surprised. I really want to try using Beatrix and 4-drop rare Tidus, the one that increases your forwards by a k, and Beatrix obviously dropping your opponent's guys by a k. That massive swing in momentum can make a huge, huge difference. So definitely, Steiner and Beatrix together, no matter which Steiner you run, is very powerful. But the way that Anthony's built his deck, Steiner is a very, very strong value forward as opposed to a searcher. And it's a really, really consistent play, and it works very, very well. I mean, he won a tournament with 160 players in it, so it's obviously not bad. And then he's got 2 copies of Legendary Cecil, which I absolutely love, and I highlighted a particular combo in my combo video for Opus 4, so do check that out if you haven't already, that involves Cecil and Steiner. Cecil's biggest drawback is the fact that he has to block. He has no choice. And because you have summoning sickness in this game, so you can't attack the turn that your forwards come out, you have to wait. There's that turn of Cecil being wide open where your opponent can just attack you and kill him before you can start attacking with your Cecil, and therefore he's dull, so he can't block. But having Steiner on the board means that you can use Cecil to buff Steiner but you don't even care about the power boost. You just want Cecil dull so that he can't block. So therefore you circumvent that problem entirely. And not only that, but Cecil's buff and the damage mitigation is just a massively good play anyway, and a lot of the stuff in this deck actually mitigates damage very, very well. So this deck will have a really positive matchup against Lightning because of having Minwoo, Beatrix and Cecil. It's going to be very, very hard to punch burn damage through on this deck. And then we have 3 copies of Knight and 2 copies of Lena, which are pretty standard fare for any good water deck because it's just very strong value. If you have backup Waka out to have the K boost, then having a Knight out with 5 backups is a 9k 2-drop. And having Lena come into play and bring one out of your break zone, you quids in. You're just going to start like steamrolling things from that point onwards. And then 2 copies of Ash, which I always agree with. I think 2 copies is definitely the right number for Ash, purely because her S ability is useful, but it's not the reason you're running her. Again, this goes in very, very well themed with the rest of the deck so that it's very, very hard to deal damage to her. She survives an Alcid combo outright. She could survive pretty much anything if you have a Waka out, as long as any kind of chip damage just isn't going to kill her because she just gets too big. And Alcid Onion Knight we'll deal 6k to her, then she'll go up by 3k, and then we'll deal 5k to her, and then she'll go up another 3k, so it does 11,000 damage, and she grows to 12k power, so it won't be enough to kill her. So she's just an extremely good forward in any water deck, so I completely understand why she's here. And then Cagnazzo in a mono water deck is pretty much a staple. It's just an extraordinary card. You know, the turn you play a Cagnazzo, you can just push for game because your opponent's guys are so much weaker, and your guys are, you're building up all this momentum so fast, you can just rush in, and there's not a lot your opponent's going to be able to do about it. Certainly not if you're not being able to be dealt damage at the same time. And then the one of Emperor. Emperor is a very, very popular card again all of a sudden in this meta because of the popularity of monsters that have an activated ability to become forwards have become really, really popular. So having something that just says, yeah, you can't do that, is a huge swing in your favour. So Emperor is definitely a card to be looking out for right now. So honestly, there's not a forward in here that I would change. I think the forward lineup is absolute perfection. Going into the backups now. Now, many of the backups in this deck are very, very standard fare for water, but there's a couple of really interesting choices that I think set this deck apart from other water decks, and it's actually really, really cool to look at. So we have 2 copies of Eiko, which makes sense to run 2 of her because you're running so much FF9, but you're not running the EX Burst Steiner, so that's very, very worthwhile in this particular deck. 2 copies of Minwoo, again, very, very popular again all of a sudden because Wind and Lightning through things like Onion Knight, Alcid, they're all becoming very popular again. Orlando is now becoming very popular as well, so having Minwoo just completely writes all those kinds of cards off, and it means that your opponent playing Wind or Earth is going to have to run Hecaton, Kaya or Archer to deal with it, so it's definitely a worthwhile play here. 3 copies of Waka makes absolute sense. You're going to want your power boost as quickly as possible just to get you that little bit of an edge. New Merlwyb is very, very strong because I think the combination of Merlwyb and Eiko means that you are able to run new Steiner instead of old Steiner because the need for you to search is a lot less prevalent because you have so much draw power and searchability in this deck. It's crazy. 3 copies of Scholar makes a lot of sense, especially with Cagnazzo, and it saves your guys from being wiped, so if you want to keep your Emperor alive in the matchups that he's relevant, because one of the biggest things with Emperor is while he's amazing and he's absolutely devastating in matchups where he's good, there are matchups where he's completely useless. But in the matchups where he's good, you're going to want to keep him alive. So having things like Scholar, very, very useful, that kind of thing. Not only that, but you've got so many come into play effects in this deck through Steiner, through Zidane, through Lena, Cagnazzo. It just makes sense in this deck. Astrologian, also very, very strong in any water deck because it counteracts a lot of Ice's shtick and Lightning, in all fairness. This deck has a very, very strong matchup against Lightning from what I could tell because it seems to just counter a lot of the things that Lightning does, and that's a really strong thing. It's nice to see that Lightning isn't always the best colour in the game because it had such a strong showing, so it's nice to see the way that it's going. And then the 2 choices here that I think are very, very different from a lot of other people's choices. The new Mystic is very, very cool because I think a lot of people kind of wrote this off instead of the new Summoner, the one that cancels summons. I think that I looked at this and I asked Anthony why he was running Mystic, and he said because he wanted his deck to be more combat focused than anything else, and he said he doesn't regret using it at all. He said he used it a very, very large number of times throughout the tournament. So maybe you guys should start checking Mystic out as well as he did, because it served him very, very well over the course of the day. And then secondly, we have Ovelia, which is very interesting because he's chosen to use Ovelia instead of Yuna, because Yuna would normally see a lot of play in a lot of water decks, and it isn't actually present here. He's using Ovelia instead, because again, it fuels that kind of combat heavy tricks. He's got kind of Beatrix and Steiner that both benefit from it being knights. So it's honestly swinging combat in his favour is the primary focus in this deck, and I really enjoy it. I think it's done very, very well, and again, there's nothing here that I would particularly change. I think the only thing that some people might want to look at is changing the Mystic for the new Summoner, but I actually think that for the theme that he was going for, it suits him very, very well. And then going into the summons and the monsters, we've got 3 Leviathan, because Leviathan is just good. You know, you just run Leviathan. 2 Cyclops. This is another very, very interesting card, because it's not a water card, it is a lightning card within a mono water deck. And the only way that he can run this card is through Garnet. So because Garnet allows you to pay 2 water for any summon that costs 3 or less. And it's so good in this deck because it again is massively combat focused. Drop all your opponent's guys by 3k, and because it's Garnet that's played it, all your guys are going to get 1,000 out of it. If your opponent's not careful, between Beatrix and Tonberry and Cyclops, your opponent's board is just going to get wiped before you've even done anything. It's a really cool idea. I've seen people like tech off-color summons to play with Garnet, but this one in particular I think is a perfect fit here. And then 1 copy of Fairy, which is again a countermeasure to kind of Ice, Genesis, that kind of thing, because it's a card from your hand that your opponent can't see. So if you don't have an Astrologian out and your opponent Genesises you, and then say the Ice Lightning deck comes about, plays Genesis, doesn't freezes your guy, goes to attack with him by giving him haste, you then go Fairy, block him, and then you've paid 2, and they've paid so much into trying to push that play forward that you've just ruined it. So it definitely makes sense to have a 1-off Fairy in this deck. And then 1 Sildra, because again, it's another card that can push for the game. This is a very, very aggressive water deck, and what it does, it says on the tin, and it does it very, very well. And then lastly, Tonberry's, honestly, probably the best monster, one of the best, if not the best monster in Opus 4. Dragon is obviously a very strong contender as well, but Tonberry's has just such a good utility use, because you know, you play it, it does something, and you have the ability to use it whenever you want, and it doesn't cost you anything extra in order to do anything. Adamantoise in water also sees a lot of play, and I absolutely see why, but for this particular deck, Tonberry's makes a lot of sense, because you're not trying to defend your stuff, you're trying to obliterate theirs. So that's why I reckon Tonberry's is in this deck. It's very, very cool. So that is the winning deck list for the Final Fantasy TCG Winter Cup, and honestly, I absolutely adore Anthony. I think he's one of the sweetest guys I've met for a long time, and one of the things that I did want to point out, and it's a fun bit of trivia for this deck that he told me, is that this deck was originally built for his girlfriend. And the reason that he wanted to build it for his girlfriend is because his girlfriend wanted a deck that was full of princesses. And if you actually look at this deck, there's quite a lot of them in here. You've got Beatrix, well, Beatrix kind of, Garnet, Lena, and Ash. So you've actually got quite a lot of them. It's like, it's quite a cute little theme, and I like it. So like, you know, if you wanted to try something, you know, get somebody like getting a female friend or a girlfriend or anything like that into the game, then, you know, if they're a girly girl, then maybe this deck might be your way in. So that's definitely something to bear in mind. Anyways, thank you very much for watching, and thank you very much to Anthony for giving me this deck list and being as lovely as he was. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and don't forget to check out the Xmas giveaway, so that we've got the Opus 4 pre-release kit for a giveaway. So if you wanted to a chance to win that, then enter with the link in the description box below. Excuse my speech, I'm just going blah, 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 blah. Anyways, thank you very much again for watching, and I've got 3 more deck lists coming up that were featured during my deck workshops over the course of the Winter Cup. So if you're interested in looking at those, then again, subscribe to the channel and wait for those to come out, because you won't be waiting too long. See you later.